Chapter 5. Storming. Rain was beginning to fall, and Skadi could feel her own water starting to spill forth. None of this made any sense. This wasn't fair. There was so much pain and confusion, and yet still so much work that needed to be done. Skadi wanted to collapse, to feel the cold embrace of death, just to end this torment that gripped her soul so tightly. She clutches at her chest, struggling to breathe. She stumbles on her footing, falling into objects as her legs seize up and she falls to the floor. Her body begins to shake and she tries to do anything. She can't think, she can't feel, she can't even cry. The boundless water behind her eyes that stung her cheeks and washed away her pain simply wouldn't come. Her vision begins to grow dark as she tries to inhale. She felt like she was drowning on dry land, like a fish out of water. No matter where she was, she never belonged. No matter what she did, it was the wrong thing. She falls to her knees, thunking down into the cold, wet sand. Even here at the beach, she was faced with hard and unrelenting barriers that hurt her every time she got close. The water washes around her sullen form, no longer a soft embrace, but a deadly grasp threatening to pull her into the deadly waters. She had no home. This place meant nothing to her. The ocean was no longer a safe place for her. She had nothing, which was worse than losing everything, because she never had anything to begin with. Her sore fingers claw and grasp at her face as she tries to hold her eyes tight. It was no use. The water that roiled in her soul was pounding against her skull. The water slowly leaked out at first until the dam eventually burst, and her tears streamed freely. Her body shook with terrible pain that can only be felt by love and loss. The understanding of a beautiful type of joy felt by someone you adore and knowing that you will never receive it again. A terrible feeling that causes a soul to lose all light and plunge into darkness. A feeling known as abandonment. She cried so hard that she couldn't even make a sound. Her jaw hung open in excruciating pain, but no cry could escape as she simply collapsed to her side. She felt as though all the life was leaving her body, as if she was actually dying from all the water escaping. It would truly be fitting, ironic even, for her to die by lack of water. She lay there for hours, her motionless corpse losing heat as her soul poured out through her eyes. She was done fighting, surviving, living. It was all pain, and gained her nothing but more pain. Her stomach growled, and she tried to remember the last time she had a meal, at a table with utensils and a competently crafted dish. She couldn't remember the last time she had laid her head against something besides her arm against cold stone or sand. There were so many things that she never got to do, but it was too late now. Had she any desire to do anything, she might have thought about trying to stay alive for one more day, just to try and achieve some of these desires. But all that thought and selfishness had left, and now she was simply a husk, uneager to even breathe. A rumble racked her body again, and then she realized that the sound emanated from elsewhere. She considered opening her eyes, but the strength wasn't there. The roar echoed across the landscape again, more distinct this time. A thunderous crack filled the air, and Skadi wasn't sure if it was her ears popping, but she swore she heard the waves slowly die down in response, as if slinking away in terror. Something had saved her from the ocean preying upon her body, but what? A drop of water splashes against her cheek, and then another. Slowly, cool drops of water rained down upon her lifeless form. She felt uneasy, confused even, but feelings slowly returned to her nevertheless. Everywhere the water touched, her emaciated form felt rejuvenated slightly. She could feel herself rousing back to consciousness as the gentle rain coaxed her back to life. She struggled to lift her head. Her entire body ached. Her muscles were sore and her face stung with tears. It was slow, and the sky did not rush her, but eventually she sat up. Her eyes cracked open, and all she saw was darkness. Light danced along the roof of the sky. Dark storm clouds filled with lightning slowly rumbled overhead. Everything was cast in a thick darkness that made it hard to see anything, but with Skadi's eyes weakened from crying, it was impossible to see anything. Nothing could be seen, except for the lightning. Skadi was no longer on the beach. She was not near the ocean or the land. The people did not exist, and there was no sword beside her. There was no duty for her here, no responsibility or abandonment. The nothing that surrounded her, and she understood it. She shakily stood up, her weak knees wobbling underneath her, and her numb feet unable to feel anything, stumbled to find her footing. Her head stayed craned upwards towards the sky. Her face was constantly gazing towards the heavens, where the only thing she saw was light crackling behind a curtain of clouds. "What do you want from me?" Skadi whispers. The rain slowly stops. The lightning slows, and the tendrils that snaked along the sky begin to converge, wrapping around a single point above her. There it stayed, pulsating softly as it waited calmly. She stood there, waiting for a sign, something to give her direction. She expected an order or some demand for her to respond to. Instead, there was just silence and darkness. "What am I supposed to do?" she cries. Her voice cracks, and she can feel the tears starting to well up again. Her eyes started to get warm, and she realized that if she cried any more, she might go blind. A gentle raindrop taps her forehead. Her shaking suddenly stopped. She hadn't realized that her entire being was vibrating until this drop of water touched her softly. Her eyelids flutter open as water lovingly caresses her face, the raindrops flowing across her features, washing away the pain and cleaning her eyes. Skadi shuddered a shaky breath. She attempted to speak some form of thanks, but no words escaped her lips. She simply stood there, allowing the rain to wash over her, healing her soul and filling her up. She felt cold, her body ached, and she still felt alone and betrayed, but somehow it felt all right. It felt okay to be sad, to be hurt. It no longer felt wrong to be selfish. She felt wronged, and her feelings were justified. Skadi slowly lowers her head, her arms dangling at her side. She felt ashamed, alone, and the rain slowly melted the failure and disappointment from her limbs. She began to shudder from the cold. Her wet clothes clung to her body, and she knew she couldn't stay like this forever. The rain started to fall more and more until she could hear the world around her getting soaked as well. Her irritation started to grow back as the water started to hit her harder and harder. "Stop it!" she screams. Her fists clench as her back spasms. "That's enough!" she yells towards the heavens. In a surprising turn of events, the water actually stops. Skadi blinks as her request is granted. A shuddering sensation courses through her body. This was the first time that she was heard, respected even. A vibration passes through her chest and reverberates across her skin. She was actually able to achieve something. She was able to gain something she desired. The lightning crackles overhead, almost congratulating her. She was healed. She wondered what else she could do. If she responded differently to things that had happened to her. If only she had spoken up before, would things be different? "They will now," Skadi mutters. There was an unsettling calm that gripped her form. The thought of rebellion wrestled her soul. She felt as though it was wrong, and yet knew that it was right. It was not wrong for her to want things, to feel used or underappreciated. Her words were power, and she no longer felt like hiding. The first things she needed to use her words for were in response to the sky and its comfort. "Thank you." Skadi clasped her arms to the side and bent at the waist, bowing deeply in respect. A raindrop taps her on the shoulder, and she slowly looks back up towards the sky. As if in response to her words, a spear of light crackles and slowly lowers down to her. The jagged line of pure white carves downward through the air to hang in front of her. Skadi trembles slightly, goosebumps rising across her skin as the electrified air causes her hair to float. This power that glowed in front of her was terrifying, Perhaps because for the first time she had purpose and didn't want to lose her chance to do something with her life. The motionless lightning hums with energy, allowing Skadi to bask in its radiance for just a moment before it slowly begins to move. The tendril sparks out to the side before turning around in a jagged curve to point at her. Skadi places a hand against her chest where the lightning was pointing. No words were spoken, none were needed. Skadi understood the gesture. The power was inside her all along. She just needed to see it. The decision was always hers. She didn't need a higher power to tell her what to do or give her strength. Skadi closes her eyes, taking a deep breath to cement the realization. When she opened her eyes again, the lightning was slowly retreating. "Wait," she says suddenly. The hand on her chest suddenly turned to reach out. The lightning stops. Skadi pulls her hand back instinctively, feeling slightly ashamed before quickly shaking it from her mind. "Why?" The question hangs in the air for a moment before she repeats it. Why are you helping me? Why do you care?" The lightning hangs motionless in the air, leaving her in silence. "I am the Lord of the Storms," a voice booms like thunder shaking mountains. Skadi blinks in response, then blinks again in surprise that she didn't recoil from the noise. "There has been a storm brewing in you for a long time. I would hate to see that storm die, but instead released." With a flash of light, a bolt of lightning slams down into the earth off to the side. Skadi shields her eyes, and when she blinks away the fogginess, she sees a glowing sword embedded into the sand. Its blade was a beautiful pearlescent chrome that radiated light, and the hilt still burned with warm energy that drew in Skadi's hand. She knew that if she touched it, that it would certainly burn her flesh. Perhaps the electricity that coursed inside the metal would fry her alive. But that was not what caused her to hesitate. She turns her head away from the blade, away from the living lightning in front of her, to the darkness beside her. There, she caught a glimpse of an old memory still laying there in the sand. The lightning catching the metallic sheen of her old sword, supposedly made by her mother and gifted to her by her father. She stared at the cold, old steel that carried nothing but pain and anguish. The silence made her decision even harder, as the Stormlord did not push her to make a decision, or entice her to leave everything behind and join him. This was her decision to make. Skadi lowers her head. "What would you have me do?" she asks calmly. She clenches her eyes closed, feeling shame wash over her again before forcing it to flee. She returns her gaze to the lightning before her, awaiting her answer. "Take your tumultuous nature and use it." The sky crackles. This was not the answer Skadi was expecting. The lightning slowly starts to recede, drawing back into the clouds and leaving Skadi in the darkness. She glances at the sword, its glow slowly fading. If she didn't grab it, then both of them may lose their spark and fall back to their lifeless ways. Skadi struggled to think. No, this was no time to think. With a last rumble of the clouds, the lightning faded as Skadi reached out into the darkness for something, anything to hold on to. And there she found what was rightfully hers, and had always been within arm's reach, as she felt the cool touch of a friend.